the WPT is doing a gigantic free roll here on December 13th at the Win. It's a $5 million free roll. All you have to do to get into the drawings that I have for free seats, they've given me a bunch of golden passports, is head over to ClubWPTGOLD.com and sign up with the code BART. Each seat is worth at least $2,500. And it's my understanding that if people don't show up and they've won, they're not putting people in. So if only 1,500 people show up, each seat's going to be worth like $3,300. All right, Graham, so where are you playing out of?
We are at the Old Faithful Caesars, Southern Indiana, just outside Louisville, Kentucky.
You know, it's funny. So when Indiana is IN, right? Is that right? IN, the state code. So, when people subscribe to the website, CLP website, one of the features you get a subscriber tag on Discord. We have a Discord community. And then that means you can write, in the forums and just write in the strategy talk. So every single person that joins the site, I have them DM me personally, and I talk to every single person that comes on. I had 3 guys this week from Southern Indiana that play out of Caesars.
Oh, no.
Indiana. Yeah, isn't that weird?
Send me their names.
All right, I'll take a look. Look at it. So, and the biggest game here that usually runs is 2-5 or what?
That's correct. We have a group of probably like 10 to 15 guys who are willing to kind of play the bigger games. So we're kind of fluid. Just for example, this past week, we got 5-10 winner straddle 20 on Thursday. And then on Saturday, we didn't get 2-5 going until like 9 p.m. So it's just kind of varies.
Okay. And what's the size of the game?
This game is just straight 5-10, 2 blinds. We got this game started like 5-handed, so we were pretty short for the majority of the time.
So you're like 5-handed. Is it just uncapped or what?
This game is 2K cap match the stack.
Oh, okay.
I think in this hand we were 6-handed.
So, I mean, in essence, it's uncapped because probably...
More or less, yeah.
I mean, when you do match the stack, people just add on. I wonder why they don't just call it uncapped, but get great match the stack games sometimes at the smaller stakes, like in Texas at like 1-3. But all right, so 6-handed, sort of a quasi 2K cap match the stack. And how deep are you?
For this hand, we are 1,500 effective, and the reason it's not uncapped is because we get guys who want to come in and sit down with like 10, 15K and think they're...
Oh, right. No, I can see that. I mean, I've always talked about how the game that I used to play before COVID, before I moved out of LA, Hollywood Park, was one of the best games, man. It was a 5-10-20, 2,500 cap, and the cap made it so that the real crushers, some of the foreign guys and some of the guys that played the super nosebleeds, they just would not play in the game because of the cap. So, and that definitely is true that it will intimidate recreational players for sure. When someone comes down and sits down with like 15K. All right, so 6-handed, 5-10. Okay.
Main villain in this hand is usually a pretty aggressive player. I would have him tagged as a loose aggressive type. He is on the button this hand, and so in this hand I am in the cutoff with Queen of Diamonds, Jack of Spades. I opened to 30. The button flats, and then the big blind flats.
Okay.
So we're going to go to the flop. Flop comes 10 of diamonds, 6 of diamonds, 5 of hearts.
10 of diamonds, 6 of diamonds, 5 of hearts. Hero with Queen Jack, Queen of Diamonds, Jack of Spades. And in an earlier call in the live stream, I sort of went into the whole old school C-bet bluffing matrix from Crush Live Poker, talking about number of players, texture. I think I would do a lot of betting here if it gets checked to you. Also, too, there's some value in betting and getting the button out of the hand as well when you're sort of in between. So I don't think it's the worst. I don't think it's the worst board. Maybe I don't always bet, but I do think I would say a fair amount I would.
Yeah, I think this is a better hand to bet than just like Black Ace King or something like that. I think I would rather have a hand that has a little bit cleaner interaction. So maybe a hand that wraps around the 10 a little bit better. Like if you had 8-9 for like a gut shot, or like Jack-9 of, I wouldn't open Jack-9 off. So like Jack-9 of hearts, maybe. I thought specifically with just Queen Jack off the single diamond, I didn't really want to start a bet, especially into a player behind me that's going to be a little bit looser and probably has more hands that connect with this flop than a tighter player.
So you would just like a little bit more interaction. I mean, you still have 3 to a straight. I mean, it's interesting.
I do.
You got Jack-9 as 3 to a straight, but Queen Jack is also, 3 to a straight as well. Okay, so big blind checks, you check?
I also check
Mhm.
button stabs 30 into 90, and the big blind folds.
Button bets 30 and big blind folds. So back over to you, and you've got the pot is like what, 125. It's 30 for you to call. You've got 2 overcards here with the queen of diamonds. Usually queen high isn't, a ton of showdown value in a given situation, but it's just sometimes like when you check call, if you're considering check calling as the preflop raiser, it does look a lot to a fair amount of opponents, even ones that are not necessarily advanced, that like you've got a lot of like ace king, ace queen, and you don't get to see like 2 free cards. Like they fire a lot on the turn if they're like blanks on the turn. So I mean, you're getting 4-1 here with a backdoor diamond draw. I mean, I don't think it's. Did you ever consider check raising possibly if you were going to continue here?
I think that's pretty decent. Versus this such a small size, I didn't really think folding was on the table whenever you have 2 overs and backdoor diamonds. Check raise is probably okay, but being out of position is just tough. If I get flatted here, I think if I got flatted, I would really want to be able to turn equity. So there's plenty of cards we turn equity on, like ace king 9 diamond. So I think check raise and just kind of going for the bluff here is somewhat decent. I just thought versus this small size, I could call and just play turns somewhat appropriately.
I think it's. I mean, some people are saying fold too. I actually think that all 3 options here are on the table. I mean, we've
Fold's just kind of weak, especially to this such small bet size.
And I assume that you're just going to check fold if a blank comes and the guy bets like a 3. You just check fold.
Yeah.
Okay. Hero calls. We can maybe call that, put that into like a little bit of a light peel. We'll see what Mr. Keys has to say about it when I hate RBF puts up this post on Discord.
Yeah, it's I think I don't really like folding at all. Especially against someone, given it's a smaller casino and smaller group that plays bigger games. A lot of us have a decent amount of hours with each other, so I just think that just knowing this player's tendencies, it's way too weak. Just go ahead and check fold. Like he can be stabbing a 6, a 5. He can just have random bluffs. So I think it's folding's off the table.
The other thing that I would say here is I would rather call with your hand than have like deuce here probably.
Oh, for sure.
You know what
it's
I
not
mean?
even close.
Yeah. All right. So 155 to the turn, right? 155 to the turn.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is actually still a raked game, so I just rounded everything down to
150.
150. Yeah, that doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Turn is the jack of diamonds, so it brings in front door diamonds and gives us top pair.
Okay.
I'm not going to really play any leads here. I don't think that makes any sense. So I check and button bet 75 into 150.
So hero checks, button bets 75. That's kind of, I mean, again, though, it just because he's betting doesn't necessarily mean he's not betting for protection here. Because I don't know, what did you say the button was like just the typical player, or is he a winning player? Or
he is definitely like very loose aggressive bluffs. I wouldn't call him like your average like middle-aged white guy, weak recreational player. He is very aggressive, has a bluffing frequency. Definitely someone who consumes CLP content and that type of stuff on YouTube. He is not your typical 2-5 kind of weak passive fish.
I was just saying that even against typical competition, I don't even know there's still going to be a betting frequency here with worse than your hand, even if he wasn't bluffing.
Bet like nines here, just trying to get protection.
Yeah, trying to get protection, and they still think you have ace king, and they don't think you've got a diamond draw because you checked the flop. So I think that there's certainly, it's not just like he's either bluffing or he has you beaten here with a half pot size bet. So if it's sort of in between, plus you've got the queen of diamonds, I think it's just a square call, right? I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah. I assume that's what you did. So hero calls.
Yeah, so I go ahead and call.
So hero calls, and now the pot is 300. Okay.
River is now the 9 of spades. So it's not my favorite river card ever. Your board's obviously pretty connected now.
So 10 of diamonds, 6 of diamonds, 5 of hearts. Hero with a preflop raiser with queen jack off with the queen of diamonds actually decides to check call against a pretty small bet on the flop from the middle. 10, 6, 5, 2 diamonds. Turns the jack of diamonds, which gives hero top pair with the queen of diamonds. Hero checks, button bets half the size of the pot. Hero calls. Pot's 300. River's the 9 for 10, 6, 5, jack 9. So yeah, it's probably not the best card in the world for you, just because it's going to bring in maybe some more like sort of 2-pair types of holdings. Also brings in 7, 8 as well for a straight. So I assume that you check here again, and you probably hope it goes check, check, I assume.
If it goes check, check, I win a pretty reasonable amount of the time,
Yep.
I think. So yeah, river 9 of spades, I check, and button goes 150 into 300. And I'm not loving it at this point.
So button bets 150. Yeah, now at this point, there's no way he's betting anything for value that's worse than your hand. I don't think. With this run out, you can't, like, I don't think he has ace 10 here, right? So the straight comes in, the diamonds have come in, so then it just comes down to, well, is he bluffing? I mean, if he's never betting anything that's worse for value, there's that. And then if he's not bluffing, there's that. Of course, there's also another possibility, which I think maybe you might be thinking of, just because I know you're a little bit of a stylist. Would you ever possibly turn this hand into a bluff in the form of a river check raise? And of course, the sort of theory of check raising rivers is you take a hand that at least has some showdown value where it could go check, check, and you win. Right? There's a fair chance that this hand might have gone check, check. Graham says if it goes check, check, he's going to win like a bunch, right? But if your opponent bets and you get into this situation where now you know if you call, you're no good, now you start to take a certain combos of hands and possibly turn them into bluffs. Whereas if you just had a busted draw with absolutely no showdown value, you wouldn't try to go for a check raise on the river, because if it goes check, check, you lose. There's no way for you to win. Here, Graham can win if it goes check, check. Now, with his hand, he's got a queen that kind of blocks king, queen. He's got a diamond in his hand that tends to blocks a little bit, some of the flushes. So, I mean, the real question is if you are thinking about this, is like, do you think a raise here in this game would get a guy off a 2-pair? And then going down from that, would it ever even get a guy off of something stronger, like 7-8 or a set or something like that? I mean, usually I'm not in the business of like trying to necessarily bluff people off of big hands. But if you think that there's a chance that he might have like run into a 2-pair type of holding or something like that, of course, you block some of the jacks up with queen jack. I suppose you could make a case that you maybe do this in a spot like this. So it might even be better if you have a jack. If we were to say, well, if we have a jack, what's the difference between like doing this with like queen 10 and queen jack? Well, if Graham has a jack, there's less of a chance that the guy has jacks up if he's going to make like a cutoff, like in terms of like what he's going to call with. So you could make a case that it's slightly better to have a jack than necessarily like have a 10. Is that, I mean, I don't even know what you're thinking. Is that what's going through your head?
So just so you know, my call just dropped, so I was gone for about 30 seconds.
Oh.
But so I might have missed some of what you said in the middle there. But more or less, what was going through my head was I had showdown value until this river, and now when he's betting, I don't really think I do, as we discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Queen. So obviously, having the queen of diamonds does block straights and flushes, and I also just thought, reading into his bet sizing, whenever he goes third pot, half pot, it's just not super nutted hands. Like I thought if he had ace X of diamonds, king X of diamonds, he would have sized up the turn. And if he did not size up the turn, he would size up the river, just with how connected the board got, just kind of targeting my hands that improve, such as 2-pair, 10-9, jack 10.
I mean, I don't know if you caught it because you got disconnected, but again, I had said like way back in the beginning that he's never betting anything worse than you for value. So
Correct.
So this is either a bluff where if you call and you win, or he's got something better for value. So if you think that the hand is possibly more efficient to raise as opposed to call, because he just doesn't really have that many bluffs, my question is, what do you think you're going to get him off of? Like, what are you trying to get him off of optimistically here?
The objective would be to get him off of a hand like 5-6 suited, 10-9 suited, Jack 10 suited, Jack 9 suited. Um, I don't think he's really folding King Queen or 7-8, and I'm not really sure his sets take these kind of sizings. So I think the thing I was mostly concerned about losing to if I called and was shown value would be kind of like a thin two pair, like 5-6, 10-9 suited.
Well, and also too, I would say that looking back at the flop, there's actually a greater chance that he has a hand like tens up or 5-6. Obviously, he can have sets too, than jacks up. Because of the fact that, number one, he bet the flop. Like you said, Jack 9, I mean, it's 10-6-5, right? And he's betting into two people. That's nothing on the flop. So that's a little bit more unlikely. You also block having a jack. So more likely that he has 5-6 or tens up than jacks up, yes. Some guys might not even value bet 5-6 here at the end. So it could get a little bit dicey. If you never think he's folding sets or like 7-8, I'm not even talking about getting him off flushes in that way. It could get a little bit dicey. What did you decide to do?
So I did decide to go ahead and check raise, mainly because, like you said, I don't expect him to be value betting anything I beat, but I also don't expect him to have super nutted hands in range just due to the smaller turn and river size. I just thought this hand blocking the queen high flush was a decent enough hand to go for it, because I do think he's flatting some hands like queen 8 suited, types of hands on the button. I think having the queen in particular is pretty good. So I go ahead and check raise.
And what's the sizing that you took here?
It starts with an 8, is 875.
So hero raised to 875. And that's another question here too, is, obviously what kind of sizing are you going to use? You guys started off at...
We've put in about 300 of the effective stack after he goes call, pre, bet, bet, bet. So we have 1,200 behind on the...
So you have 1,200 behind.
Bet.
And so... is the reason for you to go 875 as opposed to jam 1,200, that sort of live, is it possibly that whole, because again, going back to a previous call from the live stream, in theory, the larger that you would go, the more he would have to fold out. Now, you're obviously risking more, but there is this whole like weird live thing where you might get called at the same frequency, if not higher, if you start to take a larger sizing, because people will think that you're bluffing frequency. It's just a weird thing in live poker. So sometimes actually not moving all in looks more value-y. It gets the same amount of folds, sometimes even more, and it risks less. Is that what you were going with here?
Not really. It wasn't about looking value-y. It was just the fact that I don't block, the nuts. Like, even though I don't think he has tons of ace high, king high flushes here, just due to his sizing, that's still, I don't necessarily block those. So I want to raise to an amount that is still large enough to try and get folds from all of his two pair combos, and does not just, I jam, he looks at me funny, looks down at his cards, snaps, and turns over the nut flush. So I'm giving myself room to save a little money on the bluff and fold if he just puts it in on the river, while still trying to maximize fold equity against the range that I'm targeting.
Right. So you don't have the ace of diamonds, so you're not going to go balls to the wall basically here. So you raise to 875. I mean, I don't hate the play. I mean, I think again all three options are probably available on the river. Maybe calling might be the worst one. I mean, you had said like in the beginning the guy was somewhat loose aggressive, but it's just really hard to find just like a total airball here in this particular spot. So you raised to 875, and what ended up happening?
He did not seem to expect that one. Was kind of sitting back and talking to himself about the hands I could theoretically play this way. Had a decent think about it and ended up putting in the fold.
And did you find out what he had?
I did not, but I know he watches some of your videos on YouTube. So maybe whenever you put this out as a video, he can get in the comments and give us an update then. But he did not show the table. I did let him have a peek at my cards though.
Really? Did he seem upset?
No.
No? Interesting. I wonder if he was bluffing then.
It's definitely possible. If anyone can take this kind of line as a bluff, he absolutely could.
And people in the live chat, one last thing before we let you go is like, so you're gonna fold if he jams for like the last 325 over the top of your raise?
I don't see how I can do anything else.
So you're gonna fold for 325 more after check raising to 875? And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying, like, sometimes we make these raises and then all of a sudden, like, you look at the pot size and you're like, oh my God, what did I just do? Am I actually going to fold 375 more for 3,000? And then you're like, well, am I ever good here 1 out of 10 times?
I mean, I watched a hand on Triton earlier this weekend where a guy did this with ace of clubs, third pair, and raise called the river and turned a bluff catcher back in, or turned a bluff back into a bluff catcher. But that's a little above the rim.
Was that against Linus, right?
I think so.
Yeah. I do remember that.
Yeah, I think that's asking a little bit much.
Yeah, those guys are some computer wizards. Graham, thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it.